I'm going to talk today a little bit about the history and the evolution and the future of LoDo. And I think it's relevant to this group, first of all, to understand a little bit about our community going back. For those of you who weren't born in 1984 when I moved here, and for those of you who maybe are new transplants to Denver. Going to share a few stories with you. And then also, one of the things that I think is important just generally about real estate, the evolution of real estate in cities, is that I know how hard you all work. I know how passionate you are about owning restaurants, working in restaurants, aspiring to own restaurants. And one of the things that I tell you is that if you can figure out how to also own the real estate, I'm going to share with you an example of why I might think that's important. And so as you look at your business, real estate is certainly an important element to, as we talk about, I got to figure this out. Okay. Down. Okay. I want to share just a brief history of Denver, and I won't spend a lot of time, but Denver is a boom-bust town and has been since it was founded in the late 1800s. It started in the confluence of the Platte and Cherry Creek. It was founded there, and frankly, the land was owned by Native Americans. I think you all know that white people took it away from them. That was true here as well. And they did it when they found gold. So when there was economics involved. And the first part of downtown, the first street in downtown, thankfully has been saved, Larimer Square. Dana Crawford saved it in the 60s, which was quite a bold move. But what really, I think, transformed Denver in a most meaningful way was that in 1870, the railroad came. And that was really when LoDo boomed for the first time, before it went bust later. But it boomed for the first time because they built lots of warehouses, many of which are still there today, to support the train that was bringing people, both people and goods, to Denver. This is a picture of lower downtown in the 80s, and it's pretty much how it looked when I moved here. What happened after World War II, the interstate highway system was built and the need for trains diminished. All the warehouses that were around the train station became obsolete because you could build warehouses in the suburbs where trucks were stopping to pick up the goods. And LoDo really disintegrated into vacant warehouses, a lot of flop houses. There were actually some pretty cool bars that were there. But the viaducts basically took traffic from I-25 over the top of LoDo and dropped it down into what was then thought of as the central business district, and really creating this blight that occurred. But what I will tell you is that in 1984, when I moved here, there was a viaduct over 15th Street, and I hung out below. I was 26 years old. I hung out below the viaduct a lot in bars. P.F. Chang's was a pool hall called Calvin's, where I played lots of pool. Across the street was a bar called Rock Island, and there were some pretty fun places, but it has been described as being sketch. One other place, I don't know if Dave Query's here, but Jack's, what is Jack's today, was called the Terminal Bar. And there's a new Terminal Bar that a little bit different, but also known as the Billabong. And I loved it because you could get $1 long neck Budweisers at the Terminal Bar. And the other things that were occurring for me personally, in 1984, we started Sage Hospitality. And our first office was at 2342 Broadway. And that sits on the triangle that today has the Denver Rescue Mission. There's two rescue missions there, and the third part of that triangle was the Sage World headquarters. It was the best place we could find that we could afford. The rent was free in exchange for consulting services. And it only took Troy Guard about 30 years to figure out it was a good location to open Las Chingones. And now the Ramble Hotel has moved into the neighborhood. And that's kind of, that neighborhood is still, has some opportunities. But that's what was going on in my life in 1984 in LoDo. The LoDo, first of all, the word LoDo came about by a writer for the Denver Post, Dick Kreck, and Patty Calhoun's here and John Bergamo here. Don't ask them whether my facts are correct. They're my fact checkers, and so I may not get everything right. But Dick Kreck coined the phrase LoDo, and that was probably in the early 80s. But when LoDo really started to become relevant was in the late 80s. And there was a woman, Jennifer Moulton, who was running Historic Denver at the time, who collaborated with a bunch of people, Dana Crawford included, to designate all of LoDo, what we do know as LoDo today, basically from Larimer to Wynkoop, from Spear to 20th, as a historic district. 60% of the building owners inside the district were opposed to it because it meant they couldn't demolish their buildings. There were height restrictions put on it. And what I would tell you is if in the 80s, this was crazy town. It was not good urban redevelopment thinking. And yet these women, primarily led by Jennifer Moulton, really saw the possibilities of what LoDo could be if we preserved it and the character of the neighborhood, which I think was an important idea. And so that law that was passed that basically created this historic district passed by our city council in 1988 was really the beginning of what was to come in LoDo. The viaducts came down, and things started to come together. We got involved in ownership of property in LoDo in 1990, and we collaborated with Dana Crawford to buy the Oxford Hotel out of bankruptcy. It was the second time it was in bankruptcy. The first time was 1986, the second time 1990. Dana called the second one Chapter 22. And one of my dear friends who was a smart real estate guy, a lot older than I was, told me that I had lost my mind and it was at the wrong end of town. And there's a saying that I apply to me personally in real estate, which is it's better to be lucky than good. But it was hard to predict what might be happening in LoDo following that purchase. The Wynkoop Brewing Company started in 1988 by our governor, who's pictured up here. And at that time, our offices were across the street in the 18th Street Atrium building. LoDo in 1988 I would describe as a food desert. There was very little to, very few restaurants. I think McCormick's was open. There were a couple others. But Governor Hickenlooper, who I called John at the time, the out-of-work geologist who opened this brew pub, I went in there for lunch because it was frankly one of the only places I could go to that was an easy walk. And I was in there many times, and I thought the food was pretty mediocre. So I said to John one day, I said, you know what, John, this is going to be a complete failure. If you think that all you can do is sell beer to people and make money and last for a long period of time, you're crazy. You got to have good food. Well, he didn't listen to me, I don't think. But the food did improve, and Wynkoop is still around. One of the other important things that a lot of people don't know about what John did was he developed the lofts above the Wynkoop. And he got a HUD loan, which is, the idea of, you think about, I don't even know what they're worth today, but I think he sold them for $60,000 or $70,000 each. Should have bought a few. But that piece, that residential piece, may be more important than the starting of Wynkoop, in that all of a sudden LoDo was becoming a neighborhood. People were living there. And I think that, from a real estate perspective, is important. Certainly for the restaurant community, a very important idea. The other thing that was happening was we were getting retail. And Tattered Cover moved from Cherry Creek. They opened an outpost downtown. They're now obviously still there. Their Cherry Creek store is gone. And retail started to come around as well to complement some of the other things that were happening. One of the things that I think most people think about when they think about LoDo, and maybe what made LoDo what it is Coors Field, I would tell you that I don't think that's true at all. I think Coors Field came to LoDo because it was LoDo versus kind of the other way around. And thankfully, the city planners and the Rockies picked this location, because having our sports teams and our entertainment downtown is certainly a big, important asset to us. And the Rockies came in the mid-'90s, and it certainly was a shot in the arm for kind of that next move in LoDo and what was happening there. We were blessed to be work on and be awarded the right to redevelop the historic Union Station. At its peak, Union Station was taking 88 trains a day. When we looked at the station to potentially redevelop it, and frankly today, there are 2 trains a day, from 88 to 2, and it's kind of followed